Did you know that you could unconsciously be holding an oath or a legal covenant from a past life? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain to you how you can discern if you are unconsciously binding yourself to a past life oath or covenant. And I will talk a bit about how you can break or make better that oath or covenant. So stay tuned. Hi, welcome to the Charmed Life YouTube channel. This channel is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe, and I am your host. My name is Tricia Carr. I am a spiritual teacher, empathic channel and medium, and an animal telepath. And also what comes into play in this episode is the fact that I'm a hypnotherapist and I'm an ordained metaphysical minister. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to like, subscribe, share, and let your friends know about it, and also click the little bell so that you can get notifications when I publish a new video. I'm also on Instagram, so I would love it if you would follow me there for more delicious spiritual content. Let's talk about past life oaths and covenants that may be holding you back because you have unconsciously carried them over, binding yourself to them, those promises, into this life from another life. I should let you know also that there are two companions to this video. The last video that I published right here on the channel went deep into past life vows. It was really awesome. I had a great time. And then on my podcast, the audio, we have an episode that dives deep into soul contracts, sort of all flowing one to the other. And that includes an excerpt from a workshop I did in my Mystic Arts Academy. Both are linked in the description, so check them out if you like this subject. And here we go. A quick review of the difference between a vow, an oath, and a covenant. Okay, so a vow refers to a thing. An oath refers to a person. So a vow, for example, is like a vow of celibacy, which we talked about in that episode. So that's a thing or a concept. An oath, when we solemnly swear an oath, that is about a person or to a person. So let's say if you take an oath to take care of an ailing relative, if you were to swear that oath, or you swear some kind of promise about a person or to a person. Now, side note, technically speaking, marriage vows, we call them vows, they're actually more like oaths because we're swearing them to a person and about a person. And I mean, I guess in a way there's a vow of celibacy and all that kind of stuff, but you know what I mean? Like they're really more, because they involve another person, they're oaths, but it doesn't matter. Now, a covenant, which we're going to be talking about here, is a legal agreement to do something or to not do something. So in the previous video, like I said, I talk about the three most common vows that one might be carrying over from past lives or a past life. And those were, just to give you a little taste, poverty, celibacy or chastity, and obedience. But we are going to talk about oaths and covenants, starting with past life oaths. An oath, as I said, is a promise about someone. Now, a soul contract that we make pre-birth, or maybe from one life to another, it's kind of like an oath. But if you listen to that podcast, you'll find out that it's not binding and it's not necessarily activated. It's more of an art form. So anyway, check that out. But just to put a little, in case anybody's thinking about that already, just to acknowledge that. An oath is a solemn pledge or a promise that you make to a god, a king, or another person. It can have government involved, but it may not be as legally binding as a covenant, just to distinguish those a little bit. So for example, if you have made a promise, if you've made an oath, a solemn oath to care for your ailing relative, as I mentioned, if you are carrying that over from a previous life, you could, in this life, a sign that you're carrying over that oath would be that you have a hard time becoming independent, let's say of your mother, your parents, or even of a spouse. If you're carrying from a past life an oath about being sworn to another and you're divorced, and that's like right for your life, but you're having a hard time feeling free of that relationship. It could be that the penalty for breaking that oath in the past life, the stakes were really high and you want to resolve it. Or it could be that you did break that and there is, in that life, there was guilt or shame or something along those lines. So that tension that you feel around it could be from that. That's just one example of an oath. You may have, like I said, guilt about breaking an oath in a past life. And so when we have a guilt or some kind of response, it can be an over response, or it can be an under response, or it can be repressing oneself again to be good at it, but it's all happening unconsciously. So you may actually relive the oppression of that past oath by doing that, by trying to be extra good about it, because there was it could either be because there was guilt about breaking it, or because the trauma of that past life of being so oppressed by an oath that you had taken and you didn't know how to resolve. Now you are reliving it. You have the power to do it, but it just needs to be brought into the light. Now you can update an oath. You don't necessarily have to dissolve it altogether. You can just update it into a balanced and loving and in a way that isn't depleting yourself. So here's an example of how you might update an oath. We're just taking this one example of having an oath to a relative who is ill. Let's say you do have a relative who is ill, a properly dependent relative, whether it's a young person or an older person or just a person who has an ailment, and you want that in your life, but you're feeling oppressed by it. Well, being able to resource what happened in that past life oath, to update it so that it is free of those old ties from the old life, that could look like your ability to give yourself permission to ask for help. Maybe you need more support to be able to take care of your household if you're the one who's shouldering all of that. And maybe that some parents, I really see that some parents actually feel guilty sometimes that they're kind of drowning. Their identity has been consumed by parenting, or it's just so much to have a dependent. And that guilt may be just carried over from some past life oppression from that old oath where there weren't really options. They say it takes a village for a reason. So if we use that past life and the oath that may have been oppressive or that we broke and we feel guilty about, and what the karma is around that, karma, remember, being an opportunity to learn, then you might be able to give yourself permission to joyfully take care of yourself while keeping an oath. You may be able to give yourself permission to break the oath entirely if it's not in alignment for you. A sign of being out of alignment with a past life oath it might look like codependency, or it might look like enmeshment. And so actually, there you go. If you have an issue with codependency, it may be because you had an oath to be beholden to another person in some form or another, and you're still feeling the oppression from that. And like I said, it could be enmeshment, in case you aren't familiar with that term. That means when we kind of lose our identity in someone, it's a kind of deeper form of codependency, and it usually harms the other person very much. It's kind of like when, this is an extreme example, but let's say a mother starts to act like her teenage kid, dresses like them, wants to hang out with their kids and stuff. That's like enmeshment, or even, you know what I mean? But so losing your identity because of your deep commitment and codependency, that could be, and I'm a person who has codependent tendencies and have been detoxing myself from them lately. That tends to go hand in hand with being an empath. To me, it seems like it's kind of like energetic codependency. And in the previous episode, I talked about one of the vows probably being one that an empath needs to look at as to something they're carrying over. And this oath to other people might be something for an empath to really look at. Remember that your discomfort is the signal that your presence about the subject is being requested. Your discomfort with feeling oppressed by the relationship or the responsibility, that, or your guilt, that is a request, your soul, your higher self requesting your presence, your deep and abiding presence. And looking at the past life content is a great way to be able to do that. It's really awesome, really so helpful. Your soul's history is here to serve you. Okay, now let's talk about past life covenants. A sign that you are carrying over from a past life, a covenant. As I already said, a covenant is a legal agreement to do or to not do a particular thing. So, what are some signs that you might be having a past life covenant carried over into this life in a misaligned way? Well, one example would be if you are having issues with the law. if you just are getting in trouble, even if it's something like traffic laws, if you keep getting tickets, even if they're parking tickets, you know what I mean? And I've been in that situation before, and maybe I resolved them, but I think I still got some stuff about some past life covenants, because on this list, I kind of resonate with some of it. Another one might be fear of legal contracts. And oh my goodness, I feel overwhelmed by imagining legal contracts. I'm like, yes, sign at the bottom. I don't know. So I avoid them, or I just like brush through them. So having a fear of contracts, worried about them, having a fear of law enforcement. Now, there are very good reasons to be afraid of law enforcement. Some really unfortunate ones, particularly for people of color. But I'm talking more generalized here. If you have, let's just say if you have an irrational fear of law enforcement. I also have had a fear of law enforcement in this life because I had witnessed some trauma. Let's not get into too dark of a stuff. But anyway, so having a fear of law enforcement, and that could be not just necessarily the police, it could be the government, you know what I mean? Like how the legal system is carried out. Having an irrational trust or distrust in the government or the law. There's such a thing as an irrational trust. Yes, I'm not gonna look at any of the candidates or any of the propositions details. I trust it because it's that party. That's, to me, that would be like a sign we're not really using our being, but we're just kind of giving it over. It's because we have this worry or fear that we're carrying over about a legal covenant that bound us before. And so we're kind of avoidant of actually applying ourselves in it. Some other signs would be that you abuse your legal rights. You're looking for the gray areas, or you're getting away with things. What comes to mind as an example here is like a slumlord, someone who is, keeping conditions, owning a property where they have renters and they're keeping them in conditions that are subpar and trying to get away with it, or obviously tax evasion and stuff like that, or even fear of taxing and the taxing agencies. I would say also being too strictly adherent to the law, to a fault, and also rebelling against the law or avoiding it, trying to be above the law. Having an irrational fear of the law or contracts in general, or maybe commitments where there are, you do this and I do that. Now this one is as well, this past life covenant that you may have taken, the legally binding agreements. This can also be updated to be brought into the light. We can use our critical thinking. We can be balanced and change that either fear and avoidance or too strictly adherent and not using your whole being. We can change that to just pleasant loyalty while using your own being and critical thinking, your real discernment. So even though what's so interesting about the past life covenant is because it's a legal agreement. So when you exited the life, you exited the contract. I mean, that's how all legal agreements work. They only work with alive people. Now, the families and the ancestry may be carrying it through too. That's sometimes, like if someone dies in debt, then certain governments, they may actually then give that debt to the next of kin in the same way they would give the inheritance. So that could be part of the reason why you kind of carry it, because you have some resonance with the fact that your ancestral line is carrying it through, or it can be just, some of those unresolved issues that you are still bringing through into this life, and it's keeping it activated. But you have this sense of legal binding, even though it doesn't exist anymore. An unconscious memory can keep it activated. All right, so review, resolve, or update a past life oath or covenant. I go a bit more deeply into how to review these past life commitments in that last video that I mentioned, where we talk about vows. What I will highlight here is that we use the subconscious and the superconscious mind for this work. We do not use the ego mind. We do not use the analytical conscious mind. So let me highlight a little bit of that. The ego mind, it judges. It seeks to blame, shame, guilt, either yourself or someone else. It seeks to avoid or to lash out, generally speaking. So just know that's what the ego mind is doing. It's a fight-flight mechanism. The conscious analytical mind, when it is operating without either the subconscious or the superconscious mind, it analyzes from what it already knows. So it doesn't get new information. That's why we don't use just that conscious mind outside of the subconscious, superconscious. So its job is analysis, logic, decision-making, willpower, working from what has already been accumulated. That's not going to help us. So this does require an altered state, meditative self-hypnosis, a high vibrational, a neutral state, an unconditional state, unconditional positive expectation. Now, I think if you discern that it's time to break or make better, to resolve, dissolve, or to update an oath or a legal contract, then it's really cool to have some kind of ceremony that benefits it. That is, if you resourced it from a past life and you saw there was some kind of ceremony, then to do something that counterbalances it. So if there was an oath where I solemnly swear, maybe you do something where you write a decree and with your heart you solemnly swear to be in balance about this, or to resolve it, to let yourself free of it. Or if it's a legal contract, if it's a covenant, maybe you want to write out a promise to yourself and put a stamp on it or something like that. It's really powerful to have it embodied in that way. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself when you're in the process of reviewing, resolving, or updating an oath or a covenant from a past life. Is there a way that this old promise can benefit my life? Is there any way that this old promise can benefit my life? Maybe it can be channeled into loyalty in a positive and balanced way. And so maybe it needs updating. Or maybe, no, I need to be free of this covenant or oath. Is it possible to update it? Is it possible to make it a conscious promise? Another question you can ask yourself, conscious question, is, does it interfere with my life, or does it harm myself or others? And be honest. Be honest with what you review about this, because what you resource, you are going to be supported by spirit to be able to heal it. Can I reframe it? Can I reframe this oath or covenant? And with a covenant, which is legally binding, I think you can, because it's definitely no longer legally binding. So how can I reframe it into my relationship with legal agreements now? Would the greatest learning and empowerment come from resolving it or updating it? Just ask yourself these questions. Maybe write them out and let your feeling nature give you the answers. In conclusion, it's really fun to review and release from your shadow, to review and release that which you resource from past lives. Sometimes it's something that is difficult and challenging, and sometimes it's just, hey, this worked out really well. Let's pull it through. Let's pull through that lesson we already learned. There's gold in that shadow too. It's really fun just to embrace karma and pursue it as it is an art form and a learning opportunity. All right, if you would like to conduct your own review of your soul contracts, check out the description for a download of my meditative journey called Soul Contract Review Trance Meditation. I think you can also use this to prime yourself to review oaths and covenants. And of course, that podcast on soul contracts and the previous video that I did on past life vows, these are both linked in the description. Remember to check out my Mystic Arts Academy twice monthly workshops on subjects like this where you're interacting directly with me on Zoom. I also lead healing circles, give readings in a group setting, channeling sessions, group meditations. It's so fun, and you can drop in or you can join the community and subscribe. It's really affordable as well. Well, I had so much fun making this video, and I hope you did too. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.